Trigger warning. Today's episode of Queer Talk may be triggering to some viewers as we discuss genitalia and gender dysphoria.
Welcome to Queer Talk with Natalie
And Kay.
Today's topic is gender. What is gender? What's the difference between gender and sex? And what are the various gender identities of the LGBTQIA+.
Gender is what you feel you identify as, whether it be male, female, non-binary, or any of the other non-binary identities.
Sex is what's in your pants, whether it's male genitalia, female genitalia, or intersex genitalia, which will be discussed in another episode.
Now let's define some terms. Let's start with transgender. That is when you feel that you are a different gender than the gender you were born as. Next is cisgender. That is when you feel you are the same gender you were born as. You may have heard of the terms AMAB and AFAB. They refer to assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth. And lastly, gender dysphoria. That is the stress caused by feeling as though you are a different gender than what you were assigned at birth.
The gender binary includes male and female. Now you can be transgender within the gender binary by being male to female or female to male.
Non-binary is an identity where you feel you identify outside of the gender binary.
Gender identities underneath the non-binary umbrella include bigender, trigender, pangender, demi-boy, demi-girl, gender fluid, agender, gender flux, neutral, and genderqueer. Now I know that was a lot of terms, so let's go back and define some.
Let's start with bigender. That is a term that I personally identify with, and it means identifying with two genders. Next is trigender, identifying with three genders, and lastly is pangender, identifying with multiple or all genders. All three of these non-binary identities can seem a bit confusing as they are multi-gender. However, not everyone who identifies with these terms has simultaneous genders. They can switch between some, identify with multiple at the same time. It's all different for each person. Specifically with pangender, you identify with multiple or all genders. Of course, that doesn't mean all at the same time for some people. Just keep that in mind.
The next terms are demi-boy and demi-girl. This means identifying partially as a male and partially as a female, respectively. Gender fluid is a gender identity in which you fluctuate between multiple genders. So if you were to go from male to female to neutral to non-binary again.
Agender means without a gender. You don't personally identify with any gender.
Gender flux is fluctuating between intensity of gender. This is very different from gender fluid, as you do not actually change like the lean of masculinity and femininity. You go from, like, for example, female to demigirl to agender, and you fluctuate between those three. Neutral is a neutral gender, where you don't really have a masculine or feminine lean, you're just right in the middle. And genderqueer is not knowing what they identify as, but knowing that it's not cisgender, most likely because they experience gender dysphoria. And the last term of today is NB, where it's basically the term for boy and girl, but for non-binaries. Alright, that's all for today's episode of Queer Talk. Like and subscribe if you want more content from Queer Talk, or just link to this video.
Thank you and good night.